Setting up our anniversary meal had taken weeks of preparation. I had chosen her favorite restaurant, but she hadn't stopped talking about how the table by the window, with the view of the city skyline, had been reserved since our third anniversary. Had even made the extra effort to have a bottle of wine, with a ribbon tied around it, brought out by the waiters. As we sat there, everything seemed ideal. Olivia, smiling that recognizable smile that used to brighten my life, looked perfect, especially with her favorite vintage in front of her. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to think that we could get through the difficult time we were going through. I had even gone the extra mile to purchase a personalized necklace, a delicate chain with a small pendant engraved with our wedding date. My speech was ready. I was going to remind her of everything we had built together. I hoped the night would rekindle something between us, melt away the coldness, and erase the distance that had settled in over the past few months. But what I didn't know, what I could have never predicted, was that Olivia had prepared a speech of her own, and just as the wine arrived halfway through dinner, she delivered it. She leaned forward, raised her glass for a toast, her face eerily composed, and said, "I've been cheating on you for 2 years." Her voice was calm, emotionless. For a moment, the world tilted. The glass in my palm felt weightless, as if floating in midair. I waited for any sign that this was some kind of cruel anniversary joke, but her eyes, fixed on me with an unsettling clarity, told me it wasn't. The words lingered in the air like a thick fog. Betrayal, rage, humiliation, it all crashed down on me at once, but instead of letting those emotions control me, I did something that even surprised me. I smiled. Lifting my glass as if nothing had happened, I spoke in a steady voice. "To your new life." She blinked, her brows furrowing slightly, the smallest flicker of confusion crossing her face. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. No crying, no screaming, no desperate pleas. Just calm. I took a slow, deliberate sip of wine, then leaned back in my chair. "Does he make you happy?" I asked. Olivia shifted uneasily, avoiding my gaze. "It's complicated," she mumbled, and in that moment I understood. She wasn't sure. She had convinced herself she was giving up a predictable, dull life. But now, confronted with my unexpected reaction, she was beginning to question it. The server arrived, blissfully unaware of the emotional bomb that had just detonated at our table. He handed us the dessert menu. Olivia barely acknowledged him, but I casually glanced over it and said, "I'll take a look." Then I turned to her. "You should try the creme brulee." She stared at me in disbelief. "How can you pretend this isn't a big deal?" she asked. I set the menu down. "You've made your decision, Olivia. There's no point in me getting upset about it." That wasn't entirely true, of course. Inside, it felt like my heart was being ripped apart. But I wasn't about to let her see me break. When dessert arrived, I excused myself and stepped outside. The cool air helped clear the chaos in my mind. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and made a call. It had been years since I last needed my lawyer. But tonight, I did. Nathan, my attorney, answered quickly. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "Send me what you have. We'll meet in the morning." I hung up and called Alan, the private detective I had hired months ago. Ever since I noticed Olivia's late-night disappearances and secretive behavior, I had my suspicions. I needed evidence before I confronted her. And Alan had given me plenty. Photos, videos, dates, hotel receipts, even recordings of their conversations. Olivia thought she had the upper hand. She thought she had everything under control, but she had no idea. I was 10 steps ahead. When I returned to the table, Olivia was scrolling through her phone. "How are you going to explain this to the kids?" I asked. Her head snapped up. For the first time that night, she looked truly uncertain. "I'll figure it out," she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. You'll figure it out? She scowled at me. You don't have to make this harder than it is. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Harder for who, Olivia? The waiter returned, oblivious to the tension. Olivia refused dessert again, but I ordered another coffee. I wasn't in a rush to leave. As I sipped, my mind replayed the past few months. The late nights, the private phone calls, the way she pulled away from my touch. At first, I thought it was just a rough patch, something all couples go through. But deep down, I knew better. That's why I hired Alan. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, to give someone else access to my suspicions, to let them spy on my wife. But when Alan sent me photos of Olivia laughing with another man at a cafe before they checked into a hotel, I knew I had done the right thing. I had all the proof I needed, and yet she still sat across from me, pretending she was in control. "Why aren't you mad?" she asked suddenly. "Why aren't you yelling?" I set down my cup and met her gaze. "You've already made your choice, Olivia. Getting angry won't change that." She blinked, surprised. "I just didn't expect you to act like this." A small smile tugged at my lips. "You thought I'd break down? Beg you to stay?" Her silence said it all. I had already broken months ago. When I first found out, when I spent sleepless nights questioning where I went wrong. But now, I felt something else. Clarity. The waiter arrived with the check. Olivia instinctively reached for her purse, but I stopped her. "This one's on me." She frowned, wary. "You don't have to be so generous." I chuckled. "For someone who just confessed to cheating, that's a bold statement." Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away. As I signed the receipt, I gave her one final look. "You've given me a lot to think about tonight," I said lightly. She glanced at me, but I didn't wait for a response. Standing, I slipped on my jacket, stepped outside, and made one final call. "Alan," I said when he answered. "Yeah? Send me everything. Photos, videos, recordings. I want it all ready to go." "You got it," Alan replied. I hung up and took a deep breath, looking back at the glowing sign of the restaurant. Olivia thought she had won. She had no idea. The real game had just begun. Olivia believed she was in control, but the story was now mine. As I left the restaurant, I could hear the door swinging in the cool night air, closing behind me, giving me a weird feeling of closure. I didn't turn around to check if Olivia was still seated there. Maybe, for the first time in months, I wasn't required to unravel everything piece by piece. I had the advantage for years, and I wasn't about to give it up. I took a few steps before taking out my phone. Over the previous few months, calling Alan, my private investigator, had become second nature. When he picked up, I said, "It's time." Without hesitation, he replied, "I'll send everything to her and him. Before the evening is done, it will be in their inboxes. I'll make it public as well." There was a pause when I added, "Stay steady but resolute. The people closest to us need to know what she's been doing." "Are you certain?" he asked. "I've never been more certain of anything," I said with conviction. By the time I got home, my mind was racing, yet I felt strangely at ease. I poured myself a glass of whiskey because the wheels had already started turning, and there was no stopping them now. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. It didn't take long for my phone to start buzzing nonstop with emails and messages. Calls and texts flooded in, but I ignored them. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the anonymous account Alan and I had created weeks prior. Screenshots of messages, images, and detailed descriptions of Olivia's affair with David. Every lie, every betrayal, were all there for everyone to see. The views on the post skyrocketed as friends, family, and acquaintances left comments. Some were shocked, some were disgusted, and some, predictably, tried to defend her. But the consensus was clear. Olivia had gone too far, and there was no coming back from it. My phone buzzed again. This time, Olivia's name flashed across the screen. I felt both vindicated and angry as I watched it ring. She kept calling. Finally, I answered. Her voice was frantic. "What the hell did you do, Marcus? Why would you do this?" I leaned back in my chair, my tone cool but firm. "Why wouldn't I? After 2 years, did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for destroying our marriage behind my back?" "This is cruel," she snapped. "You're trying to destroy me." "You destroyed yourself," I said calmly. "I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." The only sound on the other end was her ragged breathing. After a long silence, she whispered, "What do you want from me?" I set my drink down and sighed. "Marcus, I wanted a partner I could trust, someone who respected the life we built together. But since you made it clear that wasn't you, all I want now is for you to take responsibility for your actions." The fallout started in earnest the next morning. Friends called each other, expressing their shock and disappointment in Olivia. Some cut ties with her completely. David wasn't spared either. His employer, a prestigious law firm, placed him on indefinite leave, tarnishing his carefully built reputation. Years of hard work, gone in an instant. Olivia tried to fight back, calling family members and friends to plead her case, but the evidence was indisputable. The more she tried to justify herself, the worse she looked. A few days later, I got a call from David. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Why did you do it?" His voice was defeated. "Why air everything out like this?" I answered simply. "You needed to know what it feels like." I heard his shallow breathing on the other end, but he had no response. Eventually, he murmured, "I never meant for this to happen." I laughed coldly. "The thing about choices, David, is that they have consequences, whether you meant for them or not." Toward the end of the week, Olivia showed up at the house.